I recently worked with a client around OCD using hypnosis and really saw a lot of success. So we did a single session that focused on his OCD. We had been working together for a while on other things, but we worked on the OCD in a specific session and it went really well. And he reported that he is no longer doing those behaviors that he was doing after trying to kick the habit for years, decades of certain behaviors that were causing him a lot of distress that he was just able to get over in a single session. So hypnosis is really powerful for treating OCD. And I'll just want to take a step back and first give some context and explain how hypnosis can be so helpful. So OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. And some people have the formal diagnosis. Other people have traits around it. As we'll see in a minute, it's kind of a thing that all our brains tend to do to some degree. And the question is, to what degree is it serving you or is it becoming unhelpful? And eventually people end up with a diagnosis. But you can think of OCD as your brain basically opening a loop. There's oftentimes almost like an underlying sense of anxiety. OCD and anxiety are very intertwined. And it's like your brain says, oh, what about this thing? Your brain opens up doubt and then tries to close that doubt again. So some doubt emerges, some question, and then there's this constant attempt through thought or through action to arrive at closure. And if you think of it, closure, like we all have this part in ourselves that really likes when things are taken through to completion. We get a little bit of like a dopamine boost or like a feel-good feeling when we do get that closure. Think about like how music, oftentimes there's a real pattern where music goes, takes an arc and deliberately resolves a certain chord. We expect a resolution of things. That's what our brain is trying to do. A question of some kind, some sort of fear or concern emerges, and then the brain starts closing it by obsessing about it in a way. And there's actually a lot of different kinds of OCD. I think getting too nitpicky on the type doesn't really matter, other than it can be validating to find out that there's a lot of people with the same specific type. So a common one is harm OCD, fear of being harmed. There's actually sexual orientation OCD. OCD specifically around fearing that you're a pedophile. That's actually quite common. People are worried that they're pedophiles. Relationship OCD, being worried about the dynamics of a relationship. The worry about getting things just right. Worry about contamination, things being dirty. This is a very common one. The media portrays this a lot, like the constant hand washing. There's one called scrupulosity, which we see a lot with people who have left religion. So religion and its a myriad of laws, especially fundamentalist religion, feeds nicely into the OCD tendencies. If you have a tendency to be obsessive, you got literally God on your side saying that you need to obsess. So one of my areas that I like to focus on is religious trauma. So it really intersects well with this scrupulosity type of OCD. A common one is rituals. People who feel the need to check things, check the door, that it's locked, check that the stove is off. Or people do things like a certain ritual that they need to do before they leave the house. And when they pass by a certain object in their house, they need to pray. This sort of feeling required to do something by your own mind in order to try to get closure. That's kind of how I would unscientifically and unprofessionally define this concept. Now, the treatment, interestingly enough, for OCD is quite straightforward, and more than other types of issues, it takes a very behavioral approach. So oftentimes, when it comes to anxiety or depression, typically there's all sorts of talk therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy is very common for those types of things. For OCD, behavioral therapy is the most recommended treatment, and specifically within behavior, it is specifically desensitization. Desensitization is one of the most common behavioral therapies, and it basically says your mind has an outsized fear of something, and we can actually very quickly train your mind to get used to this thing that it is mortally afraid of just by exposing you to it. So we see behavioral therapy classically in the world of a fear of spiders or fear of heights, where we slowly work towards you getting closer and closer to the edge, and it works remarkably well. Instead of it being all at once and overwhelming, we break it into little bite-sized chunks of actions, and then we're actually able to, in the course of one session or just a few sessions, help somebody overcome a fear or a phobia. Now, OCD, you can think of as a very similar way, where your mind has opened this thing and is experiencing discomfort. And what we do with it is we actually train ourselves to be okay with that discomfort. That's really what goes on here. That it can feel overwhelming and feel like I have to do this, but with the right support, you actually can learn that you can dismantle and disconnect the stimulus from the response. The trigger that wants the loop to close, the opening of the loop, and then the closing of the loop, you can learn to create space there and be in that space and learn to be comfortable and learn to feel safe. And so what's so beautiful about hypnosis is that you can vividly imagine yourself in a variety of situations, those OCD triggers, in the comfort of your own room. You don't need to go anywhere. And then you're learning to relax. It's a big part of most hypnosis experiences, is really entering a relaxed place and navigating that space in your mind. Let's say it happens when you're about to leave the house. Well, we get you to imagine that you're about to leave the house, and then we help you relax in that place and really like pause. It's like pressing pause on the video player and actually saying, okay, what's going on? What's actually going on for you? What are you feeling in your body? And then we help people relax their body. And sometimes within minutes, you can dissipate that whole thing. Usually we're so used to going from stimuli to response that when we just pause and we hang out in that gap, we see, okay, it's actually not as scary here as it seems. So that is the process. It's actually remarkably simple, but also remarkably effective. And this is partially because the treatment of OCD is a particularly prescribed behavioral experience. Hypnosis often works really well with behavioral techniques, and that is why it works so well here. Now, at Navia, we use hypnosis-assisted healing, which actually goes way further than that and helps heal childhood wounds and adverse past experiences that you've had. But hypnosis can still work really well for OCD and oftentimes can work really well just in the here and now. It's all you need. You don't need to go into the past for these types of things. And so I highly recommend, if you are on that quest, if you've been trying to deal with OCD for a long time or you're curious about this treatment, try even 1 or 2 sessions and you might just find yourself seeing significant impact.